Hi, in this lecture, I would like to discuss what is the business of business. Is the business of business to increase its profits, or maybe something else, or maybe business is supposed to function and work and create and be created in order to satisfy certain desirable social ends. I'm going to be talking about Milton Friedman's theory, and a central point of his theory is that business does not have a social responsibility. This is meant in a sense of having an obligation to promote desirable social ends. By desirable social ends, I mean things like clean environment, fulfilling jobs, offering jobs, a prejudice-free society, and many other ends that are socially valuable. Friedman's first supporting point for his argument is that business is not the kind of thing or entity that can have responsibilities. No responsibilities whatsoever, whether social or any other kinds of responsibilities. After all, the internet does not have responsibilities. The weather does not have responsibilities. So why should business have responsibilities? Business, after all, is the same type of system, or it's just an enterprise like many others, but it's not one that has responsibilities. Now, of course, sometimes the law gives, assigns business certain human-like features. So the law sometimes treats business as an individual. Of course, we're talking about an artificial individual. But this is, as I said, it's for legal purposes. Okay, for example, product liability, establishing a source of funds for product liability cases, and other legal purposes. But no one thinks of business as a person. The third point is that, on the other hand, corporate managers, business managers, they are individuals, and they do have responsibilities. However, the responsibilities that business managers do have are responsibilities that have nothing to do with social ends. These individuals, as business managers, are hired by corporations, and they have to be loyal to these corporations. And one of their duties as business managers, again, is not any activity that promotes social ends, but rather their duty is to make the most profit, the largest return in investment possible. And this is done for their corporations. And that's the end of the story. This is referred to as Friedman's shareholder theory, because in modern profits accrue to the shareholders of the corporation stock. Okay, so a shareholder, by shareholder is meant someone who owns shares of stock of a certain corporation, a company. So, what if a manager of a large corporation, or even a small corporation, or any kind of corporation, decides to pursue a social end rather than the duty that I discussed a second ago, which is to maximize profit for the business, for the corporation that this manager is working for. What happens then? Well, you see, according to this theory, according to Friedman, this is spending other people's money, essentially. It means that the managers of these corporations take money that doesn't belong to them, corporate money, business money, money of their employers, for personal or for political goals. So in a sense, this process converts market mechanisms into a political process rather than a business process. But this is socialism rather than capitalism. Now, here in, especially in the United States, where our economic system is capitalism, it's a free market capitalism. We know, well, at least we are told about the dangers of socialism. Hey, after all, Hitler was a socialist. Mussolini was a socialist. That sort of economic system doesn't work because it doesn't promote growth. It doesn't promote innovation, invention. Many supporters of capitalism would praise capitalism by saying, look at the results of capitalism. For example, look at the United States, how powerful it is, how many products and inventions they have made, we have made. And think about all the other services and even the great education that you can get in a U.S. institution. So we don't want to turn the United States into a socialist country. That's the point of the American economic system. So managers in a capitalistic free market system don't just take the money and benefit the public. Okay. Now, of course, if they make products, sell products that benefit in some way the public, that will be a byproduct of business. But the very definition of business is to make profit and to maximize profit, not to benefit people, and certainly not to pursue any social ends, anything that is of interest, of social interest. But in any case, managers would have no idea what to do, even if they wanted to to use their corporation's money to support social ends. They have only their private beliefs, these individuals. And certainly their jobs, the job of the function of most business managers is not social research. Okay, they run companies. They are not in the business of what benefits society. After all, when they go to business school, they don't study that, or if they do, they study that with an eye on what maximizes profit. Moreover, each manager would have to too small a view to expect his or her beliefs to be correct. So even if business managers were interested in could somehow use the money of their employers to benefit society, they would be blind. They would not know what to do and how to do it. A proponent of this theory might argue, think about it. Business managers go to school, the business school, they get MBAs, and they are trained in business. They are trained to do business, to understand the vicissitudes of business and all the problems, all the issues of business, how to make profit, market, all those strategies. On the other hand, other individuals go to school and get an education, and whichever that might be, the major in school, they are trained specifically to benefit others, to do research, and to understand what satisfies people. And so that's a completely different enterprise, a completely different business. So Friedman's conclusion is that the only responsibility of business and the only responsibility of managers, the managers who run these businesses, their only responsibility is to make as much profit as possible. They're not, these managers, in the business of what benefits or maximizes social ends. However, Friedman also says that this doesn't mean that business people must do whatever they want, okay, in order to maximize profit. It's not that they can do illegal things. They can't sell cocaine or defraud other people. They must follow laws, rules, and regulations. Now, as I said before, by doing their jobs, by following regulations, rules, laws, businesses, as a byproduct, okay, but not as a direct goal, but as a byproduct, they may incorporate social ends. Not because the goal is social ends, but because, for example, creating a product that satisfies certain social ends is nothing but a business strategy in order to sell more of that particular product and ultimately in order to maximize profit. Now, Friedman also says that business should adhere to generally accepted social standards and expectations. Well, for example, if I have a business and I want to make money, as much money as possible, I am not going to produce shoes, a certain model of shoes that has nails inside. So when I put my shoes on, I hurt myself, or any other bizarre product of that nature. Now, this is because, again, this is not because, well, of course that's a bizarre example, because that example very likely would be against the law, would be against some regulations. But think about it. The point is not that. So in principle, let's assume that in principle, let's say that my business. Let's use this example. That I have a business that produces shoes, but I manufacture shoes that are uncomfortable. They're very uncomfortable. But because people like them, let's say it's a name brand, I create a name for myself and I sell these shoes for a lot of money, $500 for a pair of shoes that are absolutely uncomfortable. Well, according to this theory, I think, I'm not sure 100%, but it seems to me that Friedman would say, well, nothing wrong with that. The business person, the business itself must ask a question. Is producing those shoes, the uncomfortable shoes, illegal? No. Then go for it, because that's the point of business. Okay? We don't care about creating shoes that make they're comfortable, that make people happy. The only thing that we care about is in terms of the happiness of the customer, the consumer, is that they're happy because they bought a product that they're happy about. Whether it's a bad product and an uncomfortable pair of shoes, it doesn't matter. However, typically businesses like that create uncomfortable shoes although they would not violate any laws or rules, break some rules, they're not going to do it because there are certain standards accepted in society. Okay, generally speaking, the public, the consumer, wants shoes that are comfortable, wants shoes that look like shoes. But that's about it. Okay, so that is the sense in which they have to accept social standards and follow these standards. So he points out, Friedman, that if a corporation operates in violation of moral standards or in violation of these expectations that consumers have in a particular society. See, because in our society we expect certain things. If you go to the different society, they might prefer those shoes, those uncomfortable shoes. So it depends on the society, and it depends on the laws of the society. And so by obeying the laws and by abiding by general rules accepted and standards of a society, your business will achieve the goal that it set out to achieve, which is the maximization of profit. Okay, otherwise it won't. And that is the point. So there's an important moral point to think about here. The point, it seems, that Friedman says, a business doesn't really care whether shoes hurt, whether shoes are uncomfortable or ugly or whatnot. And moreover, it seems that to say that business should not care about the law, in the sense that in the moral implications, we obey the laws because there are laws. Otherwise, we would not. Okay, that's about it. So there's nothing wrong with producing strange, uncomfortable, or ugly products or useless things. The only point is, as a matter of fact, we don't really care about the moral issues unless they are incorporated by the laws. Okay? Because, once again, the goal is profit. The goal is profit. So what's the final word? The final word is that businesses should legally and prudently pursue profit. Okay? Not that business should pursue it with reckless abandon. Just do anything that they want. But not because it's immoral to do whatever you want. It's not immoral. It's not unethical. It's because doing business prudently, okay, and legally, it is conducive to the maximization of utility. Now, of course, this sounds a lot like utilitarianism, if you remember utilitarianism, how utilitarianism works. In the words of Milton Friedman, the view has been gaining widespread acceptance that corporate officials have a social responsibility that goes beyond serving the interest of their stockholders or their members. Remember, for Friedman, it is obvious that the responsibility of business is to fulfill the interest of their stockholders and members of a company. So this view, Milton continues, shows a fundamental misconception of the character and nature of a free economy. This is what I was talking about earlier. Our free market, free economy, capitalism is built upon business, profit, and not social issues, social responsibility. It is the very character and nature of a free economy, according to Friedman. This is serious because on this view, being concerned about social responsibility would run counter, afoul, to the very nature not only of our economic system, but the very meaning, since we're talking about the United States, the very meaning of our country, which was founded precisely on these principles, that we are free, that the government establishes certain laws, but then steps back and lets the business person operate in the manner in which they find more profitable. Okay? They step away, they step back, and that's the attitude. So in such an economy, Friedman continues, there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. Yes, when Friedman writes the rules of the game, just think about it. What does that remind you of? What does that remind you of? To me, it reminds me of certainly it reminds me of Albert Carr's paper, remember, that we discussed, is business bluffing ethical, right? Because remember, in that paper, is business bluffing ethical. Remember, the point is that business cannot be evaluated from the same point of view and with the same criteria that we use to evaluate ethics in general, human ethics in a private sector. Business is a different kind of monster, different kind of creature. And according to Carr, to Mr. Carr, if you recall, the business has a special ethics, and that is game ethics. So it's just like playing poker. When you play poker, you know that when you sit at the table with other people around, you know that they're going to bluff. You're not going to hold them responsible for bluffing or regard these individuals as immoral, because that is essentially part of the game. So let me continue this long quote. Few trends could so thoroughly undermine the very foundations of our free society as the acceptance by corporate officials of a social responsibility, other than to make as much money for their stockholders as possible. This is exactly what I explained earlier. This is very important for Friedman. So it's not that it wouldn't be desirable. It might even be desirable to use business money to promote social ends. But so this is a larger claim that Friedman makes, and a very important one, and a big one. This would be, so the social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, in other words, businesses caring about social issues, would be a trend that could undermine, it could destroy the very fabric of our society. It could undermine the foundations of our free society, of our free market. In other words, Friedman is saying, look, we are a capitalistic society, and it works. It works. He might say, well, look, you can criticize capitalism as much as you want. Fine. But it works. It works because it creates goods. It creates opportunities. It creates a lot of things. And you don't want to undermine this. Well, if you obligate businesses somehow, or if you tell businesses that they have a moral responsibility to promote social ends, desirable social ends, well, you would thereby undermine the structure of our society. which is built upon a free market. Now, as I mentioned briefly a minute ago, this kind of view, this theory, is based on utilitarian ethics, utilitarian principles. Remember that utilitarianism says that the goal of morality is to maximize the preferences or happiness of the aggregate. So the greatest good for the greatest number, the greatest good on balance, okay? Now, free market theory, as I also mentioned earlier, says that we need a minimum government regulations. As I said, the government steps back and lets businesses do what they do best, what they're supposed to do. And this is what allows market to function most efficiently. But let's talk about utility and satisfaction of preferences or happiness in general. On the free market view, theory, whichever way you want to call it, managers contribute to beneficial consequences. So maximizing profit is supposed to be beneficial. However, there are 2 points to consider. Point A, we must consider the question of whether free market economy is the type of economy that is adequate as means to the ends of maximizing beneficial consequences. And point B, whether such goals are always ethical. Consider, for example, externalities such as pollution, clean water, preservation of beauty, and others. It seems that time and time again, business destroyed beauty, polluted the air and water, and depleted the soil in the very name of profit. So maximizing profit, in other words, clearly does not necessarily produce the greatest overall good for the greatest number. Furthermore, Friedman argues, remember that the sole function of business is to create profit. Okay, any other talk is just nonsense. There's no regard for social responsibility. Not because business is nasty by nature, or some people might argue even that, but because the very nature of business is to maximize profit, not to care about social ends. However, when Friedman says that a business must operate for the sole purpose of maximize profit, as long as it obeys the laws, there's something funny about that. Consider 2 points. The first one is that legal is not equal to moral. Okay? Legal and moral are not synonymous. Think about it. There are many things that are legal. Hitler sent to gas chambers legally, okay, many Jews, but that was not moral. Slavery was legal. in a sense, but it was not moral. Child labor in some countries might be legal, but not moral. If you ask me, for example, it is legal to produce tobacco. Tobacco companies produce that poison. But in my personal view, at least, it is not moral. It's immoral, in fact. And point B is very important. Yes, it is true that legal does not mean, is not synonymous with moral. But also, we have to understand that business can and often does influence the law. That's another big problem. So so we have to think about what the full import of Friedman's statement that a business operates in order to maximize profit as long as it obeys the law. Well, businesses often change laws or influence laws. And what about the notion of maximizing happiness? The problem with that idea is that people are happy when they get what they want. Call this consumer demands. But what do people want? That is the question. Because what people want, very often what people want and what makes people happy are two different things. Think about drugs, certain drugs, pornography, gambling, alcohol, etc. Such things seem to make a lot of people happy. But again, we have to consider happiness, but we have to consider what is moral. Now, of course, from the point of view of utilitarianism, well, certainly not all forms of utilitarianism, drugs and pornography may not be moral, but it seems that on the very understanding of utilitarianism as the greatest good for the greatest number would argue that happiness is what we want, and so if those things produce happiness, after all, they have to be taken into consideration. Now, of course, Mill and more recently Peter Singer would probably argue that there are different levels of goods or happiness. Okay, so or of preference. Now, Peter Singer is no longer a preference utilitarianism, but in the days he was one. He would have argued that there are true preferences and false preferences or bad preferences, such as drugs and pornography and gambling and so on. At any rate, one may also respond that free market might not be the sufficient condition for happiness, but at least it contributes to happiness by producing a lot, creating new ideas, by providing competition, because businesses have to compete, and by competing, they get better and better. They get smarter and smarter. They have to, otherwise they're going to die out. And in so doing, they stimulate new ideas. They stimulate the market. They create new jobs, new opportunities, new ideas, and in the end, everybody's happy. So as bizarre as these ends may seem to you, one may argue that it's better to have more, to have an abundance, to have all these things rather than nothing, or not to have, or to have a limited supply of products and goods and so on, right? Well, it seems to me that it's not obvious because, again, think about drugs, think about weapons, think about war, fast fashion, pornography. Think about political ads for the purpose of disrupting democratic elections, like the case of Facebook and other such examples. Okay. Another defense of this view that Friedman endorses is the rights of private owners. In other words, managers have an obligation to do what their employers want, not what you want. So, in other words, they have to obey and satisfy the demands of their stockholders or shareholders. Not necessarily, or not at all, the demands of stakeholders. In other words, people who indirectly are affected by a certain business. So it's my business, in other words, and I own it, and I do whatever I want with it, and what I want is to maximize profit for me. And if you make me use my business to care about social issues, then you will go against my rights. You infringe my rights. But now, one may respond that property rights are not absolute. For example, I don't have the right to use my gun to kill you. I don't have a right to, for example, redlining, to deny housing to a certain group of people, for example. I don't have the right to use my apartment for as a cake factory. So defenders of the economic model can say that I do have those rights, in fact, except for the right to kill or harm innocent people. But I do have those rights, whether you like it or not. So they may bite the bullet. But this seems again, yet again, to say that legal equals moral, but it isn't. It would be legal for me to destroy, for example, a natural lot of land, or woods, or a forest, as in fact it is happening as we speak. Forests are being burnt down by the livestock. One of them is the livestock sector, in order to create more pasture. But the question is whether that is moral. Now, let's talk about the moral minimum view. Another view is another approach to business, says that we have that managers must first meet moral obligations to obey a moral minimum. And this takes a Kantian sort of approach, in a sense of duty, that we have, that businesses and managers have certain duties. They have certain ethical responsibilities for example, to cause no harm, to prevent, and also to prevent harm, to cause no harm, so deliberately, and also to prevent harm, and furthermore to do good. This is what the moral minimum theory argues. To do good, however, it seems not possible because it doesn't seem plausible to obligate people to do good, especially even the very Immanuel Kant, if you recall, said that we have perfect and imperfect duty. Perfect duty, we always must follow certain rules, certain duties, but there are also imperfect duties. For example, the duty of helping others in need. We are not expected by the moral law to always, in any case, in any situation, to do it. For example, if I am sick or if I am poor, obviously I don't have an expectation to do that. Now, when you think about, in particular, the case, I have in mind the case of Facebook, when it allowed the Russian troll to post those misleading political ads that many people thought that they caused harm to the integrity of our elections. Can Facebook be said to have done something that caused harm deliberately or not? Well, perhaps not deliberately, some might argue. It did it indirectly, but it caused harm. Well, someone might, like Friedman, for example, would argue that it is not the business of Facebook to inquire and to screen all its let's call them customers or users, and ask what they are going to do with those ads. That would be a political involvement, but that's not the purpose of the business. But is it? Is that the case? All right. The last approach to corporate social responsibility is what is known as the strategic model. And on this account, social responsibility in a way is built in. So the company serves social ends by the very nature, by its very nature. So the primary purpose of or function of the business is to serve the people. So this is exactly the opposite of what Friedman had in mind when he says that business, the sole purpose of business and the responsibility of managers is to generate as much profit as possible to their employers. And if in so doing they bring about desirable social ends, those desirable social ends are the byproduct of the very business of business. On the other hand, the strategic model says that the profit is the byproduct. And so there are many corporations, for example, charities, non-profit, NGOs, educational institutions, or medical, that whose business is to provide a service to the public, to create value, not necessarily to make a profit. Now, of course, profit is what what happens when these activities operate. This reminds me of Plato in the Republic when Thrasymachus and Socrates discuss the function of a shepherd, and the function of a business person, and the function of, say, a doctor or an accountant. So Thrasymachus says, "You are silly, Socrates. Don't you understand that the very nature of say a shepherd is to benefit from his sheep." And Socrates responds that that's actually not the purpose of and the function of a shepherd. The function is to care for your sheep, but a byproduct, well, actually he puts it in terms of business. He says so. This in a strict sense, he says, Socrates, in a strict sense, a shepherd takes care of his sheep. But if we consider then the shepherd in terms of a business person, okay, then the point of the business side of being a shepherd is to make money. And similarly here, the very nature of business, according to the strategic model, is to create value, to promote desirable social ends. But of course, there's also a business side, namely to make money, to make profit. But that's not the primary goal and function and nature of business. And also there are for-profit, in addition to non-profit businesses. So for-profit, that some people call it more than profit, such as, for example, just to give you a few examples, King Arthur Flour, Seventh Generation, Patagonia. These brands, these corporations were founded specifically to create a value. If you contact Patagonia, for example, or Seventh Generation, they had a goal in mind. The goal was not, let's open a business, let's make as much money as possible. That's not the point. If that happens, good. But that is not the primary function and the reason why we open this business. That would be to serve something, to serve the public good, to create products that are sourced and they're manufactured in an ethical way. So this, in other words...
That's all, folks.
So this is all for now. And I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.